Whoa, that thing is pretty cool. Here, let me hold this right here. This is pretty cool, man.
Absolutely.
Pawn Stars isn't all about selling and buying old stuff all the time. There are also times when sellers come in with the brand new items they never even touched. From Pokemon cards and Babe Ruth baseball cards to World of Warcraft Frostmourne Sword, here are some of the untouched items on Pawn Stars. Pokemon cards.
I have probably the world's #1 Pokemon collection inside this case. Cards, and they're all Charizards.
When this man came into the shop, he brought a huge collection of Pokemon cards in a big box, and all the cards were Charizards. However, Rick had a little problem, so he had to call in Chum, the Pokemon expert, to have a look at what the man had brought in.
This guy's got Pokemon cards.
Rick, it's not Pokemon. It's Pokemon.
The man had saved them all from when he was a kid. He eventually tried giving them to his kids, but they weren't as interested as he was. So he thought, why not go and try to sell them?
So, Rick, you don't know about Pokemon?
It's like a game like 8-year-old kids play, right?
Rick didn't have much knowledge about Pokemon and how valuable those cards were. So Chum explained everything to him, from their origin to the current day. Still, Rick couldn't grasp what Chum was saying.
I really don't understand why Pokemon is such a big deal, but if something like a Beanie Baby can become worth a lot of money, maybe these can too.
The man had a lot of valuable cards, especially the first edition, which, according to him, could easily sell for $50,000 to $100,000. However, Rick wasn't ready to believe that people actually buy these kinds of things for such a high price.
So how much do you want for these things?
I'm looking for right in the area of $500,000.
With the man demanding a huge sum of $500,000, Rick knew that he had to get an expert opinion other than Chum's.
And he says they're worth $500,000, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, there's a lot of cards here, Rick.
After examining each and every card, the expert was sure that all these cards were genuine and the most valuable in the Pokeverse. According to him, Rick had 20% of the Pokemon market sitting on his counter with all those cards the man brought.
I'm estimating anywhere from $380,000 to $390,000 for this collection.
Really?
So the seller might be a little disappointed with what the expert proposed, but it was still something Rick found very, very hard to believe even after the expert's opinion.
My problem with these is if I go to sell them, I can't have any conversation about them because I know absolutely nothing. I don't even know what a Charizard does.
Rick could not buy those cards no matter how much profit he saw on them, and Chum and the seller could not help but feel disappointed in him.
I still don't know the difference between a Pokemon and a Charizard.
Actually, Charizard is a Pokemon.
Mystery box of fun.
Mystery box of fun.
Yes, it is.
What this man brought in was a mystery box of Funko Pop vinyl toys, which had both Batman and Joker inside it. These were the limited edition figurines offered at San Diego in 2013. However, it actually came with 3 figurines: Batman, Joker, and a special metallic Skeletor.
Funko's a really incredible company. They started coming out with them in the 90s, and then Funko changed hands.
The seller was a sushi chef, and he wanted some new knives, so he thought, why not go and sell his brand new untouched toys to the pawn shop? Rick had to give him a history lesson on Funko, of course.
You know, I was happy with these being a part of my collection, but then recently discovered that they might be worth something.
Okay.
The man was looking to get at least $3,000 out of the toys, so Rick had to call in the expert to determine their actual worth.
What this was in 2013, and pretty much every year since, Funko has produced what they call the Mystery Box of Fun.
After examining all those figures and seeing that their condition was perfect, the expert was sure that these 3 toys were going to sell for good money. But how much exactly? Let's find out.
What are they worth?
The set being in nice condition and what they are, I think you'd have no problem getting $2,800 for the set.
The negotiations went on, and Rick proposed $1,500 to the seller. However, the seller was not ready to go below $2,000, so the deal was not made that day. World of Warcraft Frostmourne Sword.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, man.
What is this?
This is a Frostmourne sword.
A Frostmourne sword from the World of Warcraft is what this man brought in, and Chum couldn't help but get all interested since it was about a video game.
You know about this, right?
How big of a nerd do you think I am?
The seller was himself a gamer and loved this kind of stuff. According to him, the sword is still in its original box, and even though the condition of the box might be a little off, he had not played with the sword much, so it was in mint condition.
Whoa, that thing is pretty cool. Here, let me hold this right here. Let me check this thing out here.
World of Warcraft came out in 2004. It was so huge and popular that later Epic Weapons started producing weapons from the game. So yeah, those weapons and this sword were like the real version of what was used in the game.
Sometimes people play this, they play for days and days and days and days.
Chum could not help but admire the beauty of the sword, while on the other hand, Rick could not see exactly why the sword was so valuable, as he had no idea about any kind of video games.
How much you want for this thing?
I'm thinking $5,000.
Really?
With Rick having no idea what the sword might actually be worth, he had to call in Steve the expert to have a look and inform him.
This sword in the game is the Lich King's. You definitely had to have this sword if you wanted to be one of those top tier players.
So this is why it became one of the most desirable pieces of memorabilia. When he checked it closely, the expert came to the conclusion that it was actually an authentic sword and not a replica of the original one.
I think you probably are going to be able to get somewhere around $1,350 for this.
With that said, Rick made his offer of $600, but with the seller not agreeing, they eventually settled on $750 in the end, and the deal was made.
Okay, $750. Go write them up, chum. Leave the sword here. I will put it in the box.
You want to play with it, don't you?
No, I don't want to play with it.
Babe Ruth baseball card.
Got a Babe Ruth baseball card for your consideration.
This man came into the shop with a Babe Ruth baseball card, which, according to him, was one of about a half a dozen cards. He claimed it was extremely rare, very valuable, and equally collectible too.
Oh, I mean, I'm just amazed that it's graded a 10. It's rarely you see any baseball card graded a 10. I like it, it's cool.
Babe Ruth played in the MLB in the 1920s and was a 7-time World Series champion. The seller had been a fan of his since he was 5 years old, so he collected everything he can get his hands on until the present day.
This is actually a strip card. This was a kind of card that candy store owners had.
The man wanted to sell it if he got the right price, or else he said he would take it back and give it to his grandkids so they would know the love of baseball too. However, the right price for the man was $60,000. So yeah, Rick had to call in an expert before making an offer.
These aren't certainly by far the most attractive cards. One of the rarest cards of Babe Ruth being that it's graded a perfect PSA 10.
The expert couldn't help but admire the rarity of the card and assured Rick of how collectible these cards are even in today's market. However, the most important question still remained unanswered, which was the card's worth.
I would say it'd be worth about $12,000, $15,000.
So Rick offered the man $8,000, which was of course too low for him, considering he expected at least $60,000 for the card when he came into the shop.
I'm not going to be able to come down that far. I mean, probably the lowest, my bottom dollar price would be like 40 grand.
They couldn't make a deal, and the seller left thinking that the expert had undervalued the card compared to its actual market worth. Jukebox.
The guy called me about a vintage jukebox he wants to sell.
So Rick went to check out a vintage jukebox, which in Rick's case is always a good seller. Anytime someone says they have one, Rick is ready to go over and have a look.
This is our beauty. This is the 1947 Wurlitzer Jukebox 1100.
According to the seller, that jukebox is more like a fine bottle of wine, which only gets better with age. Rick couldn't help but agree with him, seeing the mint condition the jukebox was in.
I mean, everything about this I absolutely love.
The seller loved his jukebox, and Rick loved it too. It was in pristine condition, and the company had a nice history. People still wanted it these days, and it even had history attached to it, being the first post-war machine they made in 1946. So the only thing Rick needed to know was if it worked or not.
Does it work?
Absolutely.
And the seller showed Rick how perfectly the jukebox worked, and with all said and done, it was time to make a deal.
It's cool. How much do you want for it?
$6,000 is the minimum.
Rick knew these things usually go for $5 to $6 grand, so he had to buy it for less in order to make a profit. He offered $3 grand, but the seller wasn't having it.
So I would give you like $3 grand for it.
Well, we've already turned down $3 grand.
Even when Rick offered him $4 grand, the seller said he couldn't sell it for such a low price and would have to talk to his wife about it too. So the deal couldn't be made that day.
It would be great to have $4,000, but I also know that it's really worth a whole lot more than that.
Space helmet.
What do we have here?
It's a 1966 Lost in Space original helmet.
This seller came into the shop with a space helmet from the TV show Lost in Space. Rick declared that the helmet was so cheesy that it was cool. The man had gotten the helmet from the toy shop when he was a kid and had it signed by all the actors from the show except for the doctor who had passed away then.
How much you want for it?
I like $1,500.
So Rick had to call on the expert to see if the helmet was genuine and how much, according to the expert, it was worth in the condition the seller brought it in.
I will say you don't really see too many helmets signed by these people, mostly photographs. It's rare that people kind of branch out into that.
After looking at the helmet, the expert knew it was the real deal. So Rick was ready for the real question, the worth of the helmet. The expert said that he had to examine and authenticate all the signatures one by one.
Really nice signature. Can't read every letter, but it's, looks pretty good on there.
With everything checked and done, the helmet was said to be worth $500 by the expert. But Rick had to have it checked by the toy expert too to know the worth of the helmet as well.
And it's amazing that that's all intact. Also, we have all the straps.
The expert had to admire the condition the helmet was in. And according to him, the helmet could easily go for $1,200 to $1,400.
What will you take for it?
I mean, 15 is what I'd like for it.
Not gonna happen.
But the deal got done at $900 after just some light negotiations, and Rick's condition that he would give him $900 if the seller wears the helmet once.
I'll meet you right over there.
Sounds good.
Pokemon Game Boy.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Brought something in for you today. Game Boy Color Pokemon Limited Edition.
Pokemon Game Boy Limited Edition, brand new, never opened, is what this man brought into the shop, and it was enough to get Corey's interest in the deal. The man got it from his friend, and now, after so many years, he wanted to sell it for $2,000.
Almost zero about Pokemon. I have no idea what a Charmander or a Pikachu is at all.
Yeah.
But still, Corey knew about the original Game Boy, which was very popular back in 1990, and knew that they sold out their entire inventory in 2 weeks.
Any idea what you're looking to get out of it?
I think a fair price would probably be about like $2,000.
Even though it was obvious that being the limited edition, this thing was worth a lot. Corey had to call on the expert as he didn't know enough to make a deal all by himself.
Game Boy Color Limited Edition Pokemon.
Yeah, I am very familiar with this. This is right up my alley as a collector.
The expert looked at it closely, at the condition of the box and everything. There were a few flaws on it, but the question was, what was it worth in the condition it was in?
I would estimate that based on the condition, this would probably be worth $1,200 or so.
With that said, the expert was gone, and Corey was ready to offer the seller $300 for it, and the deal got done at $400.